With gas prices at $4 a gallon, rideshare companies are paying drivers even less than what they were before gas went up. You may have heard on the news that rideshare companies are giving drivers incentives to accommodate the fuel prices. But let me tell you the truth about what's actually going on. It's not a secret among rideshare drivers that immediately when gas prices went up, the prices that rides were paying seem to have gone down significantly. Many rideshare companies and food delivery services like DoorDash and Instacart are not accepting new drivers in many areas, claiming that there's a saturation of people doing these services. And rideshare companies seem to capitalize on the notion of a shortage of drivers so that they can escalate their prices. When markets are saturated, prices are less because it becomes more competitive. Instead of rideshare companies actually compensating drivers for the increased cost of fuel today, what they're actually doing is paying social media companies and news networks to put out stories about how they're doing something so that the public's perception of the company's image is preserved. But let me show you guys what drivers are really facing right now, because since gas prices have gone up, I've done a little bit of rideshare and I'm actually shocked that the prices now are even lower than before. These rideshare companies don't care about their drivers. They don't care if drivers are making less because of the fuel costs. The only thing they care about is their public perception, for people to think that they're doing something about it, but in reality, let me show you what's happening. Let's look at these prices. Sarasota to Tampa at 3 in the morning, $37, more than 60 miles. Sarasota to Tampa rides used to average between $54 to $76 about a year and a half ago. 120 miles, $73, more than 3 hours of driving. And keep in mind, I-4 could easily become 4 or 5 hours of driving depending on traffic. The chances of getting a ride from Orlando back to Tampa or Sarasota are impossible. Downtown Sarasota to Fruitville, this is a very common ride as people are going to nightclubs, $5 on a weekend night. Even during the off season, that's at least a $10 ride. So they're trying to pay you about half what they usually do. And that's not a match ride. That is a ride that if you don't accept it, it goes against your acceptance rate. So what these rideshare companies are doing now is that they're saying, well, we're going to give up to, I mean, keep in mind, up to. Doesn't mean you're going to get $1 of fuel. You're going to get up to. So that's a variable. That's a very rare occasion. Somebody might get up to $1 per gallon saved. But the reality is that in order to save $1 on fuel, you have to be part of their elite member status, which means your acceptance rate has to be tremendously high. And imagine that would include having to go rides like this, where you're getting paid half what they're worth or less than 50 cents per mile. So yeah, we'll give you up to $1 per gallon of fuel if you drive somebody from Sarasota to Orlando for $60. I mean, crap, for as little as they're paying rideshare drivers right now, they should just pay for the whole freaking gas tank at that point. Could you imagine that? In order to actually get those benefits that rideshare companies are telling you that they're going to give their drivers, you actually physically have to accept, like, I believe it's 85% or more of rides. $41 to drive somebody from Sarasota to Largo, and I'm over by Bradenton, so you have to add another 20 minutes to that ride. That's almost 70 miles for $41, and there are tolls along the way, and there are tolls to get back as well. Look at this ride on Lyft. From Bradenton to the Tampa airport for $24, and there's tolls along the way both ways, so the chances of you getting a ride from Tampa back to Bradenton are almost impossible as well. Even in a fuel efficient car, that's almost breaking even. Lakewood Ranch to Tampa, $37. Again, there's tolls in both directions. And you're not guaranteed a ride back to Lakewood Ranch. So if you go there and you can't get a ride back, you're driving 120 miles round trip for $37 minus the tolls to cross those bridges. How's driving from Miami to Boca Grande for $160? This driver accidentally hit the accept button. Question to rideshare drivers trying to increase their acceptance rate. If you increase your cancellation rate a little bit in order to accept rides so it doesn't go against your acceptance rate, does that work? Let me know. I think a lot of drivers use their cancellation rate to keep up their acceptance rate. I don't know if anybody's ever tried doing that. Because in theory, that's like a 20% buffer that you could use in order to increase your acceptance rate while not actually going on those rides that aren't worth it. And keep in mind, guys, that many times you can have inconveniences. Like this particular GPS took me to a gate that was close in a gated community, and I had to drive around the community, losing 15 minutes and several miles. So just because it says you're only going 7 miles, that 7 miles could turn into 12 miles if it's a gated community and the GPS takes you to the wrong gate, which happens all the time here in Florida. Just like there's variables that can increase your pay, there's also variables that can reduce your pay. And driving in gated communities, this is a constant problem where the GPS takes you on roads that are closed or to gates that are not open, or the GPS will think you can drive through a gated community when you're not able to actually do that. So you can lose a lot of time, especially here in Florida where there's so many gated communities. You ever wonder if Florida was just a safe place, why does everybody have to live in a prison? And the other thing that rideshare companies like Uber like to do is to punish you for having a low acceptance rate. For example, where I'm at right now, it's midnight. I'm heading to downtown Sarasota. There's plenty of passengers all around me. It's making me drive for 17 minutes. The crazy thing is that there'll be a passenger right there on Siesta Key, and they'll make that passenger miss that ride because they're trying to punish them for having a low acceptance rate. So there could easily be a driver right there on Siesta Key who could pick up that ride, but that person on Siesta Key, they're getting ride recommendations where I'm at 17 minutes away. So what they do is that they punish drivers for having low acceptance rates by making you have to drive further to pick up passengers, even though there's passengers nearby. And this is like the way that Uber, for example, punishes drivers for not accepting low-paying rides by forcing you to go further to pick up people, even though there's people around you that need rides. And that will even happen during peak hours, meaning that many times these rideshare companies have drivers all over the place having to drive all across the city when there's people right there simply because they want to punish them for not accepting their low-paying rides. And that's the hypocrisy of these rideshare companies trying to portray to the media that they're trying to help their drivers when in reality, even though fuel prices are ridiculously high, they continue the practice of punishing people with low acceptance rates. You're an independent contractor. You don't have the right to punish me for not accepting your garbage rides, but that's the way these platforms are set up. So despite the fact they're making all these statements about how they're trying to help people, they're trying to help reduce our burden on fuel costs, shut up. No, you're not. You're making me drive 17 minutes across town every single time I get a ride simply because you don't want me to reject rides that are not even enough for fuel costs and toll, let alone a profit. And this is the reality of rideshare. On one end, they're paying the media. Why, instead of paying the media to fix your image, why don't you just not have a bad image to begin with by treating people fairly? Let me remind everybody watching today's video that the entire context of our channel is under a personal opinion disclaimer. This is just the way I see things, and I'm entitled to free speech to say it, because I know the first thing that's going to happen if a video like this goes viral is that they're going to have their lawyers come get me. The good thing about being broke is you don't have to worry about lawyers because there's nothing to take. This is the gem of all rides right here. Sarasota to Brooksville, over 100 miles in one direction for $55. And this is almost at midnight. Now, what are the chances that in Brooksville or up that way, you're going to get a ride heading south this late at night? It's impossible. This is a one-way ticket and a one-way drive back. $55 for more than 100 miles. Late night. Do you know how many inconveniences could happen late night driving that far? The person could be intoxicated. There's no telling really the risk involved with taking a ride that far late at night for so little money. But this is the reality of rideshare in 2026. As gas prices approach $4 a gallon, these companies seem to want to pay the drivers less and less every single day. And instead of paying people more to make up the surcharge for these fees of fuel, what they're actually doing is continuing to punish drivers, paying the media Listen to this. They're paying the media to make the general public think that they're doing something about the fuel costs for drivers, but in reality, they're just doubling down on some of the worst prices I have ever seen. And it's still season time here in Florida. It's busy. There's no excuse for this. This is the reality of what rideshare companies are doing to drivers in the state of Florida, and I'm sure the same scenario is playing out everywhere. There really isn't relief for drivers. There's just a larger loss. One of the worst things you could do with your time, rideshare driving. It's not worth it. I do it just to give you guys these videos and to meet people as a hobby. I couldn't imagine somebody who every single day has to go out there and face these fuel prices with these prices. It's absolutely criminal what these rideshare companies are doing. And then they got the disrespectful audacity to pay the media to make it seem like they're doing something, when in reality, they're just doubling down harder than ever. Shake my head. Welcome to the United States of America.